Welcome to Dynamos Dozen, the podcast that we bring you each and every single week, where we talk about whatever may be on our minds, from pro wrestling, sports, entertainment, music, movies, muesli, fresh socks and jocks, and everything in between. Never forgetting that sweet white powder, which is talc. I am your host, Ian the Dynamo Kelly, joined by my co-host, the one, the only, the soldier within this whole Dynamo podcast network, Mr. Niall, the shopkeeper Hogan. Niall, it's you and me again, baby.
It's always you and me, baby.
It's always you and me. We are the dream team in this podcasting world of ours. And we had this is obviously the return of Dynamos Dozen. We all mentioned, we mentioned on a couple of other shows I've been away. Rest in peace. This show is dedicated to my father-in-law, Desi, and I appreciate all the messages of support from everybody that reached out to myself or Rachel and wishing us luck and offering kind of condolences and stuff like that. So we do appreciate that. So we want to dedicate this episode to the memory, of course, of my good father-in-law, Des Murphy. And I suppose we can, because it is a wrestling show, we can put them in good company with Mr. Bobby Eaton as well. So we'll dedicate this show for all the wrestling fans out there as well to Bobby Eaton too. But yeah, from a personal point of view, I want to thank everybody that reached out with messages of support, and it's nice to know that we have a swarm out there of people that really appreciate what we do on a weekly basis. So much love from me to you guys, and thanks for supporting the show. But we are back to business, and as you can all see, I'm wearing a Wrestling Mania special. This is probably one of two that I purchased, in fairness, back in the day. That's why this one looks nice and fresh. Yeah, the one that, was the tighter fit back in the day, but I've kind of grown since then. So that one is probably just a relic at this point. I think it's an opportune time for us to say that this show is, of course, sponsored by WrestleMania, back open for business, your one and only pro wrestling shop in Ireland. And if there is more, it's certainly not as good as this one. Niall, tell them what we got going on.
We got lots going on in the shop at the moment. We've got lots of retro stuff coming in at the moment. We've just stocked up again on more figures and stuff like that. Obviously, the usual offering of mugs, masks, DVDs is all still there as well. So yeah, all good. And we've brought in some memorabilia to put on display as well for people to have a look at if they want. So some really cool stuff in there at the moment.
Yeah, it's like I always say, it's like I liken it to the Ireland's version of wrestling Pawn Stars. You know what I mean? If you go in there and you see something that you like, I don't think anything is off limits when it comes to negotiation. And you know what I mean? And if you got something that Niall has his eye on, that's also not off limits. So drop by. You never know what you'll find in there. I'll tell you here now. I've seen things in there that I never thought I would see again in my lifetime, or that you would have to get on eBay. So please do stop by. And of course, if you need to get in touch with Niall, he's available on Instagram. You can go through myself as well if you need to get in touch with Niall. If there's anything you want to get your hands on, if there's any t-shirts, any memorabilia, any kind of mugs, whatever it may be, especially coming into SummerSlam season now, he'll also get it sent out.
We've got some cool retro SummerSlam matchup shirts in the next week or so as well. And as a great man once said, everybody's got a price.
Everybody's got a price. Which kind of leads us into how we're going to do the show today. As you may see, I'm wearing a CM Punk t-shirt. It might be the last of its kind that you see. They might be updated very, very soon and made by a much different manufacturer. Because we haven't got a chance to talk about, pretty much what for me, my Calgary is doing great. My Chelsea Football Club, it's doing great. The world of pro wrestling, depending on who you listen to, it might not be doing so great. But realistically, if you're a proper pro wrestling fan and you actually just take a step back and just let your imagination run wild, as one Gene Wilder said in Willy Wonka, come with me and you'll see and you'll be in a world of pure imagination. The world of pro wrestling is getting very, very exciting right now. And it's coming around at the exact right time when we're in, football transfer windows and stuff like that, and free agencies with basketball and football and all. So, Niall, talk to me about this. We haven't had a chance to talk about it. It's crazy, right?
Where do we begin? I mean, between releases, between hirings, between debuts, between misleading contracts, between Instagram posts getting deleted, all sorts of stuff going on, contracts expiring, sponsorships, all sorts of stuff happening at the moment in the world of wrestling. It's a crazy world at the moment that you have to keep an eye on. And
MJF just posted something saying, WWE Universe, you're fired. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, and I tell you, hey, he's not a million miles away, in fairness.
No.
13 releases last night on NXT out of nowhere.
Yeah. I suppose we'll go through the releases a little bit later in the show, I suppose, from start to finish and where we were to where we are, and kind of go through who we have, because I know you've got your FBI wall beside you. People don't realize how much digging and detective work Niall puts in beside him. He's got literally everything right in front of him on paper, old school style. Yeah, remember that, kids? When you can print stuff, Niall's got it. There is only one place to start, and a pen. Oh yeah,
the pen is mightier than the sword.
Oh hell yeah, and especially than the key, especially if you spill beer on it. I know. I suppose there is really only one place to start here, Niall, and it is, I suppose, the biggest breaking news to happen in, it's not breaking news anymore, but the biggest news, I suppose, to happen in the world of pro wrestling in probably best part of a decade, really. If I'm wrong, please correct me, but obviously Daniel Bryan asking for his release and getting his release and wanting to basically go and be a pro wrestler again is something we had kind of known about for a while. But then to top that, we get the news a few weeks ago, maybe 2 weeks ago now, not even, that one Mr. Phil Brooks is ready to finally come back to professional wrestling. And for anybody that is watching the show doesn't know who Phil Brooks is, I don't know why you're watching the show, but thank you for doing so.
He's that guy from the UFC.
Yeah, this is not the guy we're talking about. This is not the guy. CM Punk has basically finally, from our understanding and from our good sources, is finally back in the world of professional wrestling, and not just as a manager or a mouthpiece or anything like that, back to actually get involved in pro wrestling again, which is huge news because, Niall, you had been clamoring for quite a long time for CM Punk to get back to WWE. Obviously, that's where you kind of saw him fit, but I think you were also not naive to think that he can't make it work wherever he goes, because obviously, CM Punk has been a star wherever he's went. But yeah, AEW have finally, basically sealed the deal pretty much with one Mr. CM Punk. Talk to me.
Yeah, it's obviously huge news in the world of pro wrestling and stuff like that, but it's just it remains to be seen now how one Booker of the Year is going to handle these two guys coming in, because it's not as his job is going to get more difficult as he goes along and tries to appease a bigger roster of superstars, let's say, But I listened to Chris Jericho the other day, who made a really, really good point. I think he was on the Steve O show. And he turned around. He was
great show, by the way. Great show. I like Steve O's show.
He was asked a question about CM Punk coming into AEW, and he said AEW is on the rise anyway. It's just it'll be on a steeper rise when CM Punk comes in. And I thought that was a really good point. If you look, since we've always questioned AEW as we went along and stuff like that. Some of the decisions have been a little strange, no less. I mean, when we talk about death matches and all that kind of crazy stuff that they do. But it seems to be they're gradually getting their act together in terms of filtering a lot of that away and putting in some good stuff there. Obviously, in the last week, Malachi Black Aleister Black, formerly known as Aleister Black, Tommy End, debuted
Look
against
good
Cody.
as well.
Yeah,
Look good. I liked it. Yeah.
looked awesome.
Yeah.
I really liked the entrance as well, but I have to say I didn't like it as much as his NXT entrance. I thought there was
No,
very
no,
good
me
stuff
neither. Me
before there
neither.
as well. And that music is just unbelievable. That NXT one. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, super cool. Great to see him back in there. I thought the mask was awesome with the skull and stuff like that and everything.
Yeah.
I thought it was really cool. I was wondering whether the mask was a subtle message as well to one Mr. Triple H. I'm not too sure. I'm not sure people picked up on it, but it looked really cool anyway, you know.
Poor LH always gets the brunt of these things, and it's like, it's not him. It's not him.
I know, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You know, it's just it's an exciting time there at the moment, and what we know about releases and more releases happening as well. AEW is going to be in a very strong position now, bringing a lot of these guys in. So I'd be a little bit more excited about AEW, and I'd be a little bit more inclined to maybe tune in a bit more.
Yeah, I was going to say something. I had a thought. Anybody that knows, I mean, we done the Four Podmen WCW show there last week, which has got great feedback as well, and it kind of brought a lot of nostalgia for a lot of people as well. I know a lot of people reached out to me personally saying like it was cool to kind of listen to, and they actually did go back and start watching Nitro from the get-go. And I think what Tony Khan has done, I think now, and good Lord, I'm always criticized for criticizing, but the difference with me is, Niall, and you notice, I will criticize someone to the point where I'm calling them all kinds of fucking idiots and whatnot. But unlike someone like Jim Cornette, I'm also willing to step back and go, I'm doing it for the greater good because I want to see them succeed. And to be honest with you, I've been the biggest, I think, from the get-go. I think, you know, this might not come across well on or come across as truthful, should I say here, on audio or on screen, depending on who's listening. But I know for a fact that you'll verify this. I've been rooting for Tony Khan since day one. Day one.
We've been rooting for proper competition.
Yeah.
But when we say proper competition, we don't necessarily want Monday Night AEW.
No.
We just want it. We want an alternative that basically maybe supplies us with our pro wrestling needs that we want. Yes. And then we have WWE, which gives us that kind of entertainment spectacle that we need and stuff like that. Exactly. So it's not a bad thing, but I think they're moving in the right direction. And I think they're bringing in people now that are going to be used in a certain way that suits what they're bringing in. So I think they're starting to really wrap their head around the stuff, you know.
It reminds me of WCW. They've done a really good job there in what Eric Bischoff did back in the day, which is what we talked about on the Podmen, that they're willing to bring people in from the indies for a spot here and there. You know what I mean? And that's what WCW used to do. They wouldn't necessarily be signed to long-term contracts, but they bring in Masahiro Chono or something, you know, for a spot on a pay-per-view and get a big match out of it. And then boom, gone. They've done it with Nick Cage, obviously with Jericho. You know, it wasn't, I suppose at the time we were probably thinking, are they going down this road of deathmatch? No, it was something a little bit different, I suppose. Didn't get the best feedback, you know, from a lot of people, but at the same time it was done. And it's and I don't think Jericho has come out of it looking bad realistically, because he's still their kind of star. And this week, obviously bringing in the Juice Juventud Guerrera, which was great to see Juventud. I was always a big fan of Juventud, and a kind of a throwback and a nostalgia throwback to, you know, those guys wrestling back in the day as well. You know what I mean? So they're willing to bring in, and they you know, it's not like they, you know, WWE don't do that. It's like you're on a contract or you're not. It's there's a WWE way, and that's it. And it's too corporate. And I think AEW, the reason why the likes of yourself and myself are probably rooting for it is because it should be the pro wrestling fans company. Do you know what I mean? A company for the pro wrestlers that can come in and let the guys work their matches out, and boom. And I think if Tony Khan can kind of tap into that Eric Bischoff way without getting too Eric Bischoff later in years, and keep that going, I think they're going to find all kinds of success. And I suppose, Niall, they're in a great position in terms of who they have, you know, in the background. obviously, you know, with your Aaron Andersons and your Dean Malenkos and
Tully.
you know, Tully Blanchards and
Tully
stuff like that.
Blanchard.
And now, of course, there's only one place that Ric Flair is going to go, which we'll talk about later. He's got his release. He's going to be there, and hopefully, him and Aaron Anderson finally make peace before it's too late. But sticking with CM Punk, I think, in hindsight, looking at it, this is the perfect place for Punk to go in and try and help grow this company, right? I mean, you can see the pros of it, and I know you've got some cons of it too. So why don't you start with the cons and then we'll try and end on a positive?
The cons are really starting to wash themselves away a little bit in terms
Yeah,
of AEW's getting its act together. You know
yeah,
what I mean? So, you know, week on week, it's beginning to progress in the right direction, which is what you want. So there's not as many cons. I suppose the one con I would have is I would have liked Punk to come back and work with those guys in WWE that he laid the platform for, if you like, with what he went through.
yeah,
Um, but and I mean, I'd imagine down the road you'd like a Mania main event and possibly, you know, a Hall of Fame as well and stuff like that. Even though a lot of these guys at this stage don't find the Hall of Fame near and dear to their heart, but you know, the Hall of Fame is kind of something that we can keep in our hearts
yeah.
in the longer time, you know, as opposed to the spectacle that it is. So they're the kind of things that I was looking at, and then I was wondering whether AEW would be big enough to match Punk's ambition. And I know financially they've lots of money, but that doesn't mean that, because WCW had lots of money as well.
Of course, makes
But
sense.
it's whether they match his ambition of what he wants it to be, or is he coming back with the idea that he wants to finish some unfinished business within the realm of pro wrestling, and then he can sail off and be satisfied with what he has. I mean, you always listen to him talking in conversations and interviews and stuff like that. He always comes across as if there's unfinished business, but not necessarily in relation to WWE, but just in relation to his career in pro wrestling.
Yeah.
That he feels he probably had a whole lot more to offer, but was never really given the platform or the opportunity to do it at the time.
Because there was no other, like, there wasn't that competition at that time. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and of course the company was focused elsewhere. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? They didn't really give him the latitude that he would need to what he wanted to do. So there's those kind of things, you know, that kind of stick out in my mind. Um, but I'm gradually coming around to the idea, and I have taken a lot of convincing, because I wasn't too sure, because we have seen a lot of god awful stuff.
Well, let's be real, right? Just for, you know, and a shout out to Ted, and apologies to Ted. We actually had a show recorded last week, a full show on this, and our opinions were very, very different. I think it's safe to say mine were pretty much in the positive frame. You and Ted were a little bit more on the fence. Ted probably a little bit more positive than yourself. But obviously, with Pro Wrestling News, it didn't come out. Listen, this will be a Patreon one for people down the line. When we get the Patreon up and running, we'll keep it in the can. Don't worry, it's not going to be buried forever. But basically, obviously, real life gets in the way at the moment, and
It's in the vault. It'll be from the vault.
it is going to be from the vault, exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, Niall, you're right, and it's mad. You've done a complete almost 180 on it, and I see why. I see why, and what you're saying is making sense, because you're seeing like that's a huge, you know, TV ratings do still matter to a lot of people, and especially to an upstart company, because I keep saying that this is a baby company realistically in the world of professional wrestling. You know what I mean? It is in the landscape when you're going up against a juggernaut like WWE that have, you know, they're a mega power basically. No pun intended.
They've had a monopoly for years.
Exactly. So this kind of upstart company who started off with a couple of guys, and now they're starting to get a bit of recognition. Like, they are now at a steady. I mean, for the second week in a row, they've been over the 1 million mark. You know, which I believe is even more than some of the WWE shows, right?
Yeah, well, it's there or thereabouts anyway.
Thereabouts,
Yeah.
which is, that's fucking huge for a company like that to get that steady 2 weeks in a row. I mean, that is absolutely huge. So props where it's due.
What are you putting that down to? What do you reckon it is?
Well, to be honest with you, I think the rumors are helping it, knowing that a Daniel Bryan and a CM Punk are coming in. I think without a shadow of a doubt that helps because people want to watch it. I know they're not expecting to see Daniel Bryan or CM Punk come in straight away, but then again, at the same time, you're not knowing when Bryan's coming in. You kind of know when Punk is coming in, so you're thinking,
Well, is there a fear in the fan base that maybe if they don't tune in one of the weeks, that maybe prior to the pay-per-views or the big shows, Punk just comes out of nowhere and hits the ring, and
it could, you know what I mean?
Or Daniel Bryan.
That could be very well it. I also think that the Elite are starting, and again, what a difference a week makes. I was kind of ripping on the kind of Elite, and they, I'm kind of starting to like their goofiness. You know what I mean? Wearing their Toon Squad or whatever they're, wearing the basketball jerseys. Yeah, like cool. I'm seeing a bit more. Do you know what I'm doing? I'm seeing a bit more personality from the likes of Kenny Omega now, which I'm going, okay, I like this. You know what I mean? Yeah. And this is what I've always said. I don't hate Kenny Omega. Like, Jesus H. Christ. Like, I've said this to you how many times, Niall? I've said it to everyone listening. I want to see more personality from the guy, not just the finger bang in the ring and doing the usual shtick. You know what I mean? And I'm looking in my head, I'm thinking, Kenny Omega, wouldn't he benefit from being in the ring with the likes of a Daniel Bryan and a Punk? Can you imagine a program with him and Daniel Bryan, should I say? Actually, forget Daniel Bryan, Bryan Danielson, the American Dragon. This is what we're talking about here. And actually getting into about, the wrestling side of it, or, CM Punk getting involved with him. I think this is what's exciting about it. I think, even the goofiness of the Young Bucks, because they are two goofballs anyway, let's be real. But
I suppose when you're dealing with something like a Space Jam movie, you can be a goofball and it's well with it because it's a goofball type of movie,
Because let's be fair, like no one really rips on Triple H and Shawn Michaels in their 40s being goofballs and throwing silly things around the place and acting like idiots. You know what I mean? They're considered
when it's DX, it's cool.
Exactly. And no, but I think it's starting to be cool for the Elite now. Do you know what I mean? They're kind of I think everything's just starting to fall into place somehow, and everyone's finding their spot. And I think Kenny Omega would probably, I don't know whether he would welcome it. I don't know about the politics. Still is up in the air now with AEW. I still don't trust it. You know what I mean? In terms of what they would do, but I don't think, if you're a Tony Khan and you've got Kenny Omega here and you've got CM Punk here and they're having a gripe, I think you know where Tony's going with. You know what I mean? He's going to go with Punk and say, sorry, it's...
Yeah, I think what we're saying with Kenny and with the Bucks is now there's a realization, I suppose, that there has to be an element of legitimacy to your work. And not everything can be like a prank or an episode of being the Elite or,
a knock to Jim Cornette. Like, not everything's about Jim Cornette. You know what I mean? It's an old wrestling veteran who has a really successful podcast, and not everything on your TV show has to be a knock to him because he criticizes you,
And remember with who they're signing and with who they're bringing in and stuff like that, there's only a certain amount of space on that TV show.
Yeah.
So someone along the line is going to miss out. So you better be bringing your A game, and your A game better be more than just a bit of crack.
And I think Tony Khan is going to start realizing that as well, isn't he?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think so.
I think so. Yeah. Hiring these kind of former wrestlers that were your friends because you need a spot in a TV show, I don't think it's going to hang anymore. I don't think, the likes of the Orange Cassidys and all these guys who have kind of, stepped up and kind of made a bit of a name for themselves, and they have the kind of figures and stuff now, and they have a bit of a fan base. They're also going to have to step up. But in fairness, they have done so. Do you know what I mean? I think they have done so. I think Orange Cassidy, I know people were surprised for me kind of giving him props and putting him over at one point. I'm not a huge fan of the guy, but at the same time, when he can go and it's different, you know what I mean? The likes of Pac, I want to see the likes of Pac getting in the ring with the likes of Daniel Bryan. You know what I mean? Jesus H. Christ, imagine that.
That'll be a match. Yeah.
There's a match right there. I want to see the likes of, what Punk can do with the likes of Darby Allin, or,
Is there a case for potentially doing, and you know I'm crazy when it comes to booking anyway. But
Yeah.
shout out to Finley Martin.
That's
Finley Martin. They know I'm crazy at booking.
Finley Martin sitting there going, yes, you are. But not as crazy as that Jason fella.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there a case for doing like an invasion angle kind of factiony kind of thing or something like that?
You know what? I think so.
Because they have a number of guys in there now, and obviously the timing of Daniel Bryan and CM Punk was literally nearly at the same time. I wonder, are these?
I know
guys
where you're going
in?
with this.
You know what I mean? I wonder, are these guys coming in to come in as like a, you know, like a let's say like a nexus, if you like.
No,
you know?
I know what you're going to say. Listen, if you're Tony Khan, if you're listening to Niall Hogan right now, go and offer Vince the rights for Bash at the Beach tomorrow.
But you know what I mean? I just wonder. I mean, sometimes you even wonder, are these guys all working together? And that's like tinfoil hat stuff out there, big time. You know what I mean? But you look at it at the moment, and you look at the ease of how these guys are being let loose. Let's say, for lack of a better word, it's very, very strange, isn't it? When you've gone from, say, a year ago to 18 months ago, he was trying to tie these guys down so they couldn't escape, and now it's like, yeah, go ahead, best of luck over there. Hope you do great.
I honestly think. All right, and I know we've kind of segued now, but I suppose it does fit the narrative because we are talking about Bryan and Punk. I mean, it's not, look, we can talk at a later show on how we think that they'll come in and all that kind of good stuff, you know what I mean? For now, we're talking about what the impact will be, I suppose, more so than anything else. I mean, I think Vince's ego is so big, and we know this, that, you know, this isn't really a threat to them. They don't really see it. I mean, he's kind of alluded to it as much, hasn't he, during the week by saying, you know, yeah, well, this isn't WCW. You know what I mean? So he's kind of, I don't think he kind of believes that the likes of Tony Khan and whoever's there has the potential to really put up much of a threat. And that's absolutely fair enough. I mean, it's not going to put them out of business. I think that's what he's trying to say. Like, they're not going to put them out of business. This isn't the Monday Night Wars where Vince is, you know, struggling, you know, to pay guys anymore. I think this is more a case of that he's got now, you know, a board that he has to sit around and basically go blip, 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 and keep.
And he's adopted a totally different business model with the Peacocks of this world.
Exactly. So I don't think it's not the same fight. It's not the same war, but I believe it's good for AEW to believe that it is, if that makes sense.
That's where I was coming from, more of an internal yoke. I wasn't especially thinking that the boys would show up on an army jeep outside the Raw or something like that, you know. But I was thinking within the confines, could they create some sort of a faction in there that goes up against AEW guys? You know what I mean? Like the way they did with the ECW stuff back in the day, the invasion thing with the ECW, but obviously better booked and better handled and better people involved.
Yeah, I think so.
And I'm just wondering if that is thinking that, like, I know Punk probably wouldn't be interested in that because he's not really that kind of guy in terms of, he doesn't necessarily want to throw daggers at a particular wall. He actually wants to cement his own legacy, if you like. But it's just, it's interesting to say, like, I mean, they're scooping up anyone and everyone, so they certainly have the makings of there, you know.
I think more so, but I think they're being really smart because people are assuming that everybody that gets released from WWE is on a contract. I know by talking to a friend of the show, obviously Thunder Rosa, that's not really the case. You know what I mean? Like, they're not all getting hired to like 2-3 year contracts. They're getting shots, like they're getting spots on shows.
Yeah.
And if they do a good job, they're coming back. You know what I mean? It's only certain guys and big names that are getting, you know, brought into. And look, I think, you know, we all made a bit of a joke about it there. Well, I didn't, but I know, I think we did actually. Yeah, to be fair, we made a bit of a joke about it on a previous Podman episode that, you know, they're bringing in the likes of the Big Show and Mark Henry and all on these comment to do commentary. These guys could be pivotal in the long run because them being involved in doing analysis and commentary and stuff like that, because that's the way it goes now. I mean, sports in general has never been so analyzed to the point where it literally wears itself thin than it is right now. Do you know what I mean? Because people just love hearing podcasts about stuff. They love hearing analysis pre-game, you know, pre and post-match. And I think you know, it does make sense that they have all these guys in because they have a hand in it. They get these guys down to contracts because they have been involved in the business. You know what I mean?
Mm.
You know, that's why you don't hire Dave Meltzer to you know to run a storyline for you. But it's handy for them to have him on side that he's putting them over on the internet or whatever, even though he's a bum like. I have no problem saying that because we all know that Dave Meltzer's a fucking an absolute clown. But you know, they're starting to put pieces in there that's making their foundation very, very sturdy. I think for an upstart company, and pieces that TNA, even when they had the money, didn't put in place. If that makes any sense to you.
Well, I suppose in fairness to TNA, I mean, the availability of what they wanted wasn't really there.
You know, but I mean, we're talking about TNA now since 2003, since when I was made my debut. Do you know what I mean? So they at one point they had the potential to put these pieces in play. They had the money because they paid money to big guys to come in and do spots for them and to run their shows for them. But I think what's happening here is, I mean, like, people need to realize as well, this isn't Tony Khan just throwing $1 billion around and going, oh, blah, 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 blah. The contracts are very, some of the contracts are very reasonable for the guys that are coming in. They're just happy to get a spot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, if you're say a guy coming off the back of, even let's say Braun Strowman, for example, or even, what's his name? Miro.
Yeah.
If you're a guy like Miro, you can't come into AEW and demand more money than you got in WWE. Think about it. How can you? You can't, and I'll tell you how you can't, because you're not really in the strongest negotiation, the strongest negotiating standpoint, because, like, unless your agent is a miracle worker, if he was getting $1 million a year, he can't go, well, I want 1.5. But, like, no, because your stock isn't exactly, you know, they let you go. We'll bring you in on maybe a few shot deal, and you can work on the indies and do that, and you can make your money elsewhere. But I'm telling you here now, that's how it's working.
Yeah, no, I think in fairness, I get where you're coming from, but I think Miro's probably a bad example because Rusev was involved in a lot of high level stuff in WWE.
All right, well, yeah, well, I'm just using him as
Yeah, so I think and his timing of coming in as well, because he was kind of one of the first guys. If you park the likes of Cody and the
right, well, let's say but even the likes of Sean Spears, he wouldn't have been coming in for multi-millions.
No.
This is the point I'm making. I'm not right. Maybe Miro was a bad example, but even at Miro at that point, I still don't think Miro's on major money. Do you know what I mean? I think he will do from his merch and stuff like that, and I think that's obviously one thing that
I think, as you said, it's kind of a case by case kind of.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, it's, you know, when you're talking about Daniel Bryan and CM Punk, it's a different world.
That's a different level. If they want a 3 or 4 year contract guaranteed fucking $2 million a year, you're giving it to them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're giving it to them. You know? I mean, obviously Punk is his contract will probably be the highest that they've ever paid. Like, probably, I think Jericho and Jim Ross are the highest at the moment, which just goes to show you, like, Jim Ross is on a bigger contract than most of their main event talent, which is why I'm saying that he's not throwing money away. Like, he's not just going, hey, Kenny Omega, just because you're a president or a co-president or whatever the hell they call them, you know, Jim Ross is on more money.
Yeah.
You know, so I think he's being smart. Look, you don't get to be a billionaire like the Khan family by just being douchebags and throwing money away. You know what I mean? They own an NFL team. All I'm trying to say here is, like, let's look at it from a different perspective and say they're not throwing the money at individuals to the level that we think they are. They're not throwing money to individuals at the level that WCW were back in the day. I can guarantee you that.
No, definitely not.
Guarantee you that. When you look at some of those WCW contracts, good Lord, there was guys, you know, that were forgotten about, that were on 300 grand a year, and they were literally showing up on Nitro maybe twice a year. Do you know what I mean? They were getting paid to sit at home. I think this is different. Miro was probably a bad example. You are correct in that.
Yeah.
But I think the likes of Sean Spears, I think that's a better way of looking at it. And I think maybe
Yeah.
even the likes of the latest debut as well is probably, case.
It's definitely case by case.
Yeah. But definitely, I mean, there's a reason Jericho and the likes of Cody are the highest paid, because they're the biggest stars that they've had. And I think obviously if you're bringing in CM Punk now and Daniel Bryan, to be fair, they're the biggest stars that you're gonna have, that can go. You want to take a moment to maybe talk about Jericho as well, just in terms of what he's been doing, because we were quite critical on the show that hasn't aired yet. The fact that he was going to do a death match with Nick Gage, and still, it still doesn't sit right with me that the match even happened. I have to say, I did look at it, and you could tell Gage was trying to be as delicate as he could with Jericho, probably because he knew that if he got caught in a grove for real, all those street symbols won't do shit for him. But I suppose Jericho, you have to hand it to him that he's still grafting away. I mean, I know, like, he really is trying his best to push that company up at the moment, isn't he?
Yeah, I think, look, his work rate is never without question, you know what I mean? And look, his body of work stands up to anyone in the business.
Ever, yeah.
I think whether you need to go down the road of this type of thing to draw eyes, and whether it's the right eyes or not, and I think when we look back in 15 or 20 years' time, when we're talking about Chris Jericho's career, will anyone be talking about the death match with Nick Gage? I doubt very much. But that was basically really my view on it. But listening to him talk about it, he was all in on the match, and like he said that he helped construct most of the match as well, which was an interesting narrative, considering Gage's background in these matches and stuff like that. And
I suppose he wanted to make himself safe and make sure that it was safe for the fans as well,
Yeah, and I just look, that's the way he is, isn't it? He's meticulous at times in some of the stuff that he does, but it's just it's sometimes you look at it and you think it's a midlife crisis. Other times you look at it and you think maybe it's a pathway to deliver into something else, and it's bringing in more audience as they step up in the platform and stuff like that. As we said, we're quite critical at times because it's not, that kind of stuff is not for us.
No.
And it's not necessarily the audience that we'd want to be sitting beside at a wrestling event.
No.
But that's the reality of it, you know what I mean? That these guys want to kind of bring in a little bit of everything. And that's okay, as long as that kind of thing is few and far between in my eyes, if you want to be a legitimate company in terms of pro wrestling.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think I don't think you're going to see any more of that with the whole, pizza cutter and the fucking Domino's coming in afterwards. That's like, I watched that back as it was on the on TNT or whatever, and it was like, good lord. You couldn't have written this, you know what I mean? But yeah, I mean, it was what it was. I don't think the feedback, you can definitely tell that the higher ups, would have been told, listen, knock that shit on the head. It's all well and good coming out and using the odd cuss word and being a bit more edgy and stuff like that, but yeah, we're not having that. I mean, glass flying out into the crowd and all the pane of glass flying out into the crowd. I mean, good lord, you're asking for trouble there. You know what I mean? And you know what I mean financially.
Oh yeah.
This is the United States we're talking about. After all, everybody's got a lawyer on fucking quick dial. So, but yeah, I mean, looking further into the future. Obviously, we know Chicago is completely sold out, which is crazy. As soon as there's a murmur of CM Punk, that should tell you the draw that this man is going to be. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they sell those shows out anyway. Generally,
they do, but it's the speed of which it fucking happened. You know what I mean?
Chicago would be very much an original Ring of Honor hotbed as well. You know what I mean? So
it's a great pro wrestling town in general. Yeah, it always has been. Yeah.
But it would have been a Ring of Honor stronghold back in the day, So those guys up there, those Chicago fans, in terms of sports, in terms of pro wrestling, very educated, know what they want, but very strong, boisterous fans. And I wouldn't see any problem selling that out anyway. I think even without the whispers and even without any of the confirmations, I think it will sell out anyway. Because
I think the speed of which they sold it out though is more my point.
Yeah. Yeah.
People know something's coming, like, you know what I mean?
Mm.
But
yeah,
we'll do that. We'll finish the show off with the exciting part of it. Don't worry, we've got this. We've got this. Let's look at the last. Since we've talked about it, actually, there's a lot of releases that we need to talk about. Good Lord, where do we start? I mean, Ric Flair's asked for his release. I mean, got it. I know he's come out with a statement and said that, you know, look, I asked for it. It's no problem with this. Look, that's the token gesture, isn't it? There's a reason Rick asked for his fucking release. Come on. I don't think that kind of PR, you know, towing the fucking the line of the agent or the you know, of the lawyer, you know, works for Ric Flair. I don't think that's the full story, personally.
Well, I suppose it's a way of keeping the door open if you've another 3 Hall of Fame rings due to you or something like that.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
It's
that type of thing, you know what
I mean? He'll be there for the 4 Podmen fucking ring as well.
yeah, absolutely, yeah. I don't know, like, people sometimes look at these things and they, you know, they go, oh my God, what's going on there? You know what I mean? Bray Wyatt was released, obviously.
Yes, I mean, Bray Wyatt was a big one, yeah.
Yeah, but I just think, you know, I think they had done nearly everything they could do with him in terms of, you know, Jay often refers to him as the eater of gimmicks and stuff like that and all. And I think they've thrown everything at him, and where most times he's done okay with it and stuff like that, I think he probably needs to go out into the wrestling world and reestablish himself and maybe come back. Like what Drew did, or you know what I mean. I think he needs to go out there and legitimize himself a little bit, if you like.
Well, in what sense though? That's the question I'm asking, because I mean, in terms of, I mean, he was one of the biggest merch sellers and blah blah blah. Like, I mean, he was definitely over, especially as Bray Wyatt. I mean, I think that's where it all went downhill, because as Bray Wyatt, he was fine. I think the company missed a beat on him with that. I think where Jay is coming from then afterwards is the eater gimmicks came afterwards, where it was, you know, there was a bit more kind of, you know, and I can see that, you know what I mean? But in terms of, like, how much of it is his fault and how much of it is booking and these fucking Hollywood writers who literally don't know what they're doing?
I'm not too sure. I think what happens maybe with some of this talent is they get so gimmicked up to the max, and it's gimmick after gimmick after gimmick after gimmick.
You don't know the real person then, almost.
The actual real work of what you're looking for. Like, if you look at the Wyatt family were kind of cool in terms of the entrance and the backstory and all that
great
kind of stuff.
Living on the bayous, cool. Perfect.
But when they got to the ring as well, there was an element of work there within them, with the likes of Brody Lee and Bray and Eric Rowan, stuff like that. So they brought a little bit more in the ring. But what happens is, as time goes on, you start getting this stupid stuff in the ring, like the holographic stuff with Randy and all, and it gets to a point, I think, where you're so gimmicked out that people can no longer focus on the ring work that you're doing, and they're focused on all the gimmick stuff, and they just get worn out by it.
But I think go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no. So I'm thinking if Bray Wyatt goes out there into the market and maybe not necessarily just jumps to AEW or something like that, but I think he could probably do some work with them. But more in a kind of, let's say, like a Dark Order kind of way, where you have a real good sort of faction-y type of thing, but your actual ring work isn't lost within the actual gimmick of the faction, if you like. And I think he could spend time in Japan. I think he could spend time in Impact, in a number of different places. And I think he could go out and reinvent himself again and legitimize himself as a very, very good performer, with an opportunity maybe to come back again. And that's what I would look at in Bray Wyatt.
See, the problem I have with that is that makes sense to me. But the problem that I have with that is this isn't your kind of, you know, Terry Funks that could fuck off to Japan for a while and not be heard about. And the only time you'd hear about them is in the wrestling magazines or in the sheets. This is a time where you can't really just go and reinvent yourself off in the Orient even, because all eyes are on you at all times. You
Well,
know
you
what I
see,
mean?
I don't mean in terms of reinvent yourself. What I mean is terms of refocusing the good that you have, if you like. I'm not necessarily meaning he needs to go off and become some other character or something like that. I think he needs to come off and deliver over maybe 18 months or 2 years a body of work that stands up. That's what I mean
Oh
in
no,
terms of
and
going
what
out.
you're saying makes
Yeah.
sense. I mean, I'm with you, but what I'm saying is, it's not like you and me tend to go to the old school way of thinking,
Mm,
whereas the modern day
yeah.
way of thinking isn't isn't that anymore. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Because see,
Um,
what I'm thinking at the moment is, let's say he goes to AEW and he pops up out on stage, and let's say he has some version of a fucking lantern or whatever the hell it is,
yeah,
you know what I mean? And the crowd obviously will pop for that for a couple of weeks or a month or maybe or something like that. But eventually, then it will become the same old stick, because they have CM Punk in there, they have Daniel Bryan in there, they're going in there, Jericho's in there, Cody's in there. There's a lot of legitimacy in there, and obviously Bray Wyatt, with having the legacy of the family as well, with Mike Rotunda and all that being his dad. I mean, he has to go out now, I think, and create some sort of a body of work that stands up to scrutiny before you start putting all the different layers back in, like a Wyatt family or whatever it is. You know what I mean? And that's what I think. I think with Bray Wyatt, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if we hear that Bray requested his release, because he needs to do something different. And they probably had some ideas for him coming back. And he probably turned around and said, listen, this is the same old shit, fucking Nexus, Wyatt family, Firefly Funhouse crap mixed into a blender that you're throwing at me again. And I'm kind of jaded by it.
I would. That's my line of thinking
Mm.
personally.
So
That
that's what I'm
is
thinking.
my line of thinking. I mean, he is a pro wrestling. He is from a pro wrestling family, so pro wrestling is in his blood, and I'd say that comes first and foremost. And from what we've seen in matches with him back in the day, he can go, he can work,
Yeah.
and he's a big boy as well. You know what I mean? So getting him, you know, in there with good people that can go with him is absolutely, apropos.
Yeah.
I think it's perfect. I think it's exactly what he needs. Um, you know, that's why I asked you how much do you think of it is his fault and WWE's fault, because I mean, Vince certainly wasn't listening to him going, oh yeah, let's dim the lights and we'll have worms on the ring and all that, blah blah blah. That's not his fucking decision to do that. You know what I mean? He can't make that happen. That's that's the Hollywood fucking jabronis that they have backstage, and he's probably going, well, I have to go with this and I can make it work. But he is not that high up in the company that he can make that happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm sure Randy liked doing something different, and Randy probably thought, well, I can get a fucking movie career after this for myself. You know what I mean? But realistically, I think Bray Wyatt, I do think when I look back, definitely underutilized in the right senses. I think when they had that whole Sister Abigail thing going on, that would have been really cool if they had something really dark come out of that. But they didn't. They teased it, and there was no such thing as fucking Sister Abigail. You know what I mean? And that's the problem you have with these writers, because they don't know what they're doing, basically. And then they might have an idea for a story, but then you've got Vince just going, nah, fuck it.
Yeah, and then I suppose with the influence of Peacock there as well, you're wondering like how dark can they go in terms of a gimmick,
Exactly.
before it kind of weirds people out a little bit to the point where they go, nah, we're not too shot on this,
Yeah, like I mean, even now, what do they do even with Alexa Bliss now? Like, what's her, what's her deal? I mean, I think Alexa Bliss. I mean, I do think AEW now should be looking at some of the females to make that division stronger. I think they can make that division a hell of a lot stronger. And I think the likes of Rio will start getting lost in the shuffle with that. You know what I mean? Because she's not your world champion. Like, she's not that level. Never, in my opinion. Not when you've got some of the ladies that are possibly going to be available soon. I mean, Martinez is available now as well. But that's a fucking huge coup for them if they. I mean, I'm thinking to myself there. If you're someone like Thunder Rosa, you're looking at that going, I'll have that. Yeah. So so Bray Wyatt went. That's a huge one, and obviously today, well, not just 24 hours ago. How many? You know what? there was how many releases?
13 in total from NXT.
Unlucky for some.
Yeah,
Good Lord.
lucky for some, but some of them kind of shocked me, and some of them didn't. Some of them were on current TV, and they were released, which is always for me is kind of weird. You know, I often accept kind of the ones that haven't been around for 6 or 8 months and are in the background. They've nothing for them, so they let them go. There's no point in tying them down. But the likes of Bronson Reed was a weird one for me. I mean, he was doing really, really well. He seemed kind of pretty over. He was in around that North American belt and stuff like that and all. And I just thought that was a weird one. But then I heard word today, I read a story where apparently they're rebranding the whole of NXT and they're changing the setup, they're changing the lighting, they're creating a new logo, all this kind of thing. And that kind of scares me at the moment, you know, because it's, you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Do you think that's H's decision? Or do you think it's...
I don't know, because the talk is that the people that they let go were kind of slightly older, if you like, and they want to go down a road of a kind of a younger, let's say a younger kind of roster, if you like, with this rebranding and stuff like that. But you know, what's made NXT so successful has been that sort of mix of experience and youth.
Imagine that's euthanasia kind of shit. Let's kill him now, you know, because he's older. Like, yeah, I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
And then we're hearing backstage backstage.
Are we going to get rid of Ciampa and Joe then because they're old?
Yeah. And they've only just brought Joe back to bring him in to help out with talent relations as well, which is kind of weird. What about? I mean, I have to bring up Adam Cole. What about Adam Cole and this whole contract thing, which is kind of weird? Apparently, last night backstage at SmackDown, there was an emergency meeting between Adam Cole and Vince McMahon. Because his contract had basically expired, but they gave him an extension through till the end of SummerSlam, because of the storyline. But surely to God, Adam Cole can't be in the mix as one of those guys they potentially want to let go this easy. I mean, he's outstanding. He's been Mr. NXT along with Balor for how many years now? I mean, most of NXT that we watch, apart from the women being so good and stuff like that, as well as the likes of like Undisputed Era, have been absolutely electric along with Balor and stuff like that.
Kyle O'Reilly
and then we're hearing that Pete Dunne's and then we're hearing that Pete Dunne's contract is about to expire as well. You know, so it's
you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna take a pause for the cause. As soon as we come back, we're going to talk about that because I have something in mind. And I think it involved Balor too. And I think it's not just going to involve Balor. I think it's going to involve a lot of the roster that are coming up, because I'm looking at someone like Karrion Kross. You're losing clean on Raw, but then you're meant to be strong down in NXT. And I think this is more an internal battle. And I think it just involves the old man. So let's take a little pause for the cause, and as soon as we come back, we'll finalize our thoughts on this, because I think it's I feel a meltdown within the within New York. So we'll be right back after this. So basically, we were just saying there, NXT getting rid of certain stars, whatnot. This seems to me that like Vince or whoever, Vince always gets the blame on it all, but there's somebody that seems to be fighting against H all the time on this. And Balor, of course, their biggest star. I mean, by name and by brand or whatever, is their biggest star. They bring him up. You know, you think he's going to SummerSlam. You know, they get the homeless guy to come out, and what they're doing with Corbin is just mad. Comes out and trashes him and basically lays him out. And then Cena comes out, trashes him, lays him out, and he signs the contract. But wasn't Finn Balor's name on the contract?
Yeah, well, this is kind of the storyline they're going with, aren't they? That they're going to go down the road of a legal storyline where he'll get legal advice that his name is on the contract, but his signature isn't on it. And this more than likely will probably lead to a triple threat, which I absolutely detest. I just hate these triple threats, because if you have a triple threat in there with Reigns, Balor, and Cena, my guess is Balor's going to be the guy spending the time on his ass on the outside, and that's not good.
Because quite clearly he's not as good a worker as either of them, right?
Well, in the eyes of the company, let's say at the moment, the other two would be viewed as being bigger, not necessarily in what they bring to
Well,
the
look, John
table.
Cena is one of the biggest
Yeah.
stars of all time. So,
Yeah.
and Roman Reigns is, but like, why put him in that position if that's what you need to do? Why not just have it a straight? I don't understand that. That's Pritchard.
Yeah. Potentially, yeah. I mean, that's it. But I just, I don't understand it. Like, I mean, if that's where it's going to lead to, and you want to have them in a big focus of a storyline, because I mean, once SummerSlam is out of the way, then they're going to be going along the road building towards the Rock and Survivor Series, aren't they? So nothing else is really going to matter.
The Rock.
Yeah.
Okay, hit us with this news now.
Yeah, well, the talk is the Rock is potentially going to make the return for Survivor Series because it's the 25th or 30-year anniversary or something like that. It's big, and that's going to be the show that lays the foundation for our main event in Dallas next year, which the
is
talk is Rock and Reigns. So that's the. And you know how WWE these days likes laying out their main events way in advance and stuff like that. So
I'm all in on that. I have no problem with that. And by the way, Roman Reigns is probably the best thing in wrestling today. I just want to say that whole scene where he's just sitting back.
Brilliant.
Feet on the table. And only the look of disgust when John Cena signed the contract. Just like, he's, you know what? I'm so happy for Roman Reigns that he's finally becoming the guy that we knew what he was, because we've been basically singing his praise for I don't know how long. But yeah, let's finish this off then by kind of, obviously a lot of these potential signings can go to AEW. A lot of them won't. A lot of them will probably go over to Japan. A lot of them will probably work on the indies and whatnot, and they'll still make money, which is great. And obviously the name value that they have from WWE is kind of, so important to them. But let's kind of finish it off with a little bit of, I suppose, positivity. And there's only one name that we can really, I wore a t-shirt today for a goddamn reason, so we better talk about it. CM Punk. Obviously he's coming back to Chicago, isn't he? Like, it's I mean, it wouldn't be unlike CM Punk to kind of leave you wait until the day after, but I don't think in this scenario that's the case. I mean, what would be your more preferred type of scenario with CM Punk coming back? Do you think he comes back and basically scares the shit out of Kenny Omega? Or
yeah, I think I know Darby Allin there the other day alluded to this best of the world stuff.
It was very good, actually. Which
was pretty cool.
Yeah, I liked it.
But,
yeah.
I think if you're bringing, I think they might do the switcheroo on that. I could see maybe Daniel Bryan or Bryan Danielson maybe going the Darby Allin route, maybe, and they're just doing it like a little swerve or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't see Punk debuting against Darby Allin, and no disrespect to Darby Allin, he's been brilliant.
No, I think that's just the case that they wanted someone to say something, and he was the perfect.
Yeah. So it gets people thinking again, but I think you have to bring Punk right in at the top end, don't you? Really? You're not going to bring Punk in and sort of work him up through the roster to get to Kenny Omega,
No.
And then it just remains to be seen, but what way do they want to book that? You know what I mean? Because obviously Kenny's had the belt now, and it's probably due a change as well, isn't it? It's due a shake up at that top level anyway.
But you know what? A potential Kenny Omega heel, as he is now, with that whole kind of clan behind him, against CM Punk as the one-man army, kind of shooting them down. Very, very interesting, isn't it?
Or you could go the other way. You could bring Punk in as a heel, and he just tears into the fans. He's brilliant at it.
But I think more so it would be Punk tearing into the Elite.
Yeah,
you know what
possibly.
I mean?
Yeah, I think there's so many layers to what they can do there with CM Punk. They need to figure out really what they want to do. I'm just thinking of a scenario where he's going to get a pop that blows the roof off the building. But I'm thinking if he comes out and he cuts a promo, like a pipe bomb kind of promo, where he turns around and he says, "You all think I came back for you guys? You're so wrong." You know what I mean? This kind of thing. Yeah. Or I came back. There's only one reason why I came back, or whatever it is. You know what I mean? And you know, that kind of thing. So there's so much they could do with CM Punk. I mean, you can flip CM Punk so easy. Look, he's made a career out of flipping stuff, hasn't he? Like, so.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
your ideal scenario is for Punk to come back as a heel. Is that what you're saying?
no, not necessarily. I mean, I don't mind where I don't have a preference to a
You
heel
just
or a
want to see
baby
him
face.
on the show.
I just want to see him in something that's pretty meaningful and groundbreaking, that it shakes the foundation of wrestling when it happens. That's what I kind of really want. I don't want him just to walk out on the stage and Living Colors playing and the Chicago crowd pop for him, and that's all well and good, but that's a given, you know what I mean? We've been waiting on that for how many years at this stage. But that he's actually comes out and that he's involved in something really, really meaningful, you know, like that Kenny Omega situation or something like that, that absolutely rocks the foundation of AEW, and let's not say puts these guys in their place, but
What
puts
about
these guys in their place.
what about something like he comes out and puts MJF in his place, because we know this whole Jericho thing is going on. That's going to be a pretty big deal at the, you know, what about something like that? Just something out of left field, but still big enough that it would make a mark. You know what I mean?
Or he sides with MJF and he goes up against Jericho.
See, I say black, you say white. It's just it's
Yeah.
This is what's the great thing about this podcast.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
for this week, I think we'll leave it there, because I think there's going to be a lot more, and obviously we're going to do this, you know, on a weekly basis. Yourself and myself, and we'll have guests along the way. We're gonna look at wrestling news more so, and we'll just concentrate on what's going on, and obviously with SummerSlam coming up in a couple of weeks as well, we'll do a build up to that as well. We're just basically going to concentrate on wrestling news. So this is something that we've been working on in the background and trying to kind of see what fits. But this is your Dynamos Dozen pro wrestling news episode, I suppose. And never thought I'd be that kind of mark guy, but there you go. You know, times they are changing, eh?
As you said at the top of the show, pro wrestling is becoming a very interesting area at the moment in terms of news and what's unfolding. So it's all good.
Absolutely. How can we not talk about it? And once again, obviously, we want to, obviously Bobby Eaton's beautiful Bobby Eaton, one of the greatest professional wrestlers of all time, the best top rope leg drop I think I've ever seen. No offense, Phil Boyd, if you're watching, but I'm sure he'd even agree. One of the guys that got real heat, and yet was the nicest chap in the world by all accounts of people that knew him. So absolutely travesty, and he's with his wife now though, which is a nice kind of story. You know, his wife only passed shortly before him. So sometimes people want to be with their significant others, and sometimes that's a nice story too. So absolute travesty, but at the same time, we're always going to pay tribute and send our best regards to everyone that suffers within the, because it is a family. You know what I mean? It is a professional wrestling family. But until next week, I have been your host, Ian the Dynamo Kelly. I have been joined once again by the shopkeeper, Niall Hogan. And for me, for Niall, Dynamo's Dozen is over and out.